uh, I went to, I mentioned I went to this, school in Metro Detroit, the Roper School, which was founded by Holocaust survivors, students of Freud, in the Frankfurt School, progressive first school in Metro Detroit to integrate and, on the forefront of, everything, God forbid, you stand against. And there was a
I'm not
terrible,
against integration, but okay.
well, I mean, in terms of progressive liberal
I'm against the
policy.
Frankfurt School for sure. All right. Anyway, go
Yeah,
on.
but I mean, I say that people do a lot of good, even if they, or politically. But it appears that a high school teacher had some sort of assignment, and there was a question about, which animals are primates, and I guess technically humans are primates, but they chose as the human picture President Obama,
Ooh.
and which pretty clearly has racist
Oh,
overtones.
clearly.
I mean, it could have shows a picture of me or you, if you want to say that we're primates, but it shows President Obama, and it ended up on the news, and now it's national news, and the news isn't necessarily reporting that we're this liberal progressive school that does everything to fight racism, and it's reporting that we're this this horrible racist school that's comparing Obama to a monkey. I mean, it's on the Young Turks. Had just
Uh,
did a show on it. Like
well, it's not on the
pricey
school.
prep school compares Obama to a monkey.
Yeah, I don't think the school doesn't sound like it was the school doing it. It was just this one teacher. Was this like a something that this teacher had put up there on a public like website? What was it like? What was the deal?
I'm not sure if it was an online assignment. It looked like something that the teacher just took from a generic website.
Mm.
They're saying it was Duke University, but just from like a biology site that had problems that just kind of copied and pasted uh, problems, or student problems. And this problem, which is a general problem, like what animals are primates, but the clearly, God forbid, racist overtones of having President Obama, and somehow it's a national news story, and
Right. Well, it's very
people are rushing
insulting.
to condemn the school. People are rushing
Yeah.
to say people have to be fired,
Yeah.
and to me, it's not surprising. And even God forbid, uh, anyone could be a victim of it. Saying even the most anti-racist school in Michigan, now is falling under the politics of the accusation of racism, and they're demanding people get fired, and just the bad press, which
Is this teacher still on in the staff of the school, or do they
I
do
think
they
they just
name
put
the
them on
teacher by
administrative
name?
leave. It was so bad they had to cancel school for the day.
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean here they've had a few of those here in Boston. They had one of our preeminent exam schools, Boston Latin School, about 5 years ago. A couple of young women who happen to be Black set up a Facebook page where they mentioned a couple of insulting comments. They were very mildly insulting, actually, that had happened many, many years earlier on a page which they called it Black at BLS. And the result was that you had three agencies, federal, state, and local, come in, and the school almost went under martial law. It was crazy. Principal had to resign, vice principal was fired. Eventually, the whole place was shaken up. And the end result was a year or two later, they ended the exam. It's no longer, this is America's oldest high school. It goes back to, it's older than Harvard. It was established in colonial times. So, these sorts of things can happen. But David, I think that perhaps the story, which is, it's insulting, but it's obviously being blown way out of proportion, I think.
I have to assume it was just a stupid mistake. I mean,
Yeah,
because
or even if
we just had a walkout. My parents live right across like the school just literally had a walkout the other day for trans rights. Like the school is like literally like the most probably progressive liberal school.
very woke.
One of them in the
Part
whole
of the
state.
woke Gestapo. No, I get it.
Woke, it didn't
Well,
matter.
those are the ones that fall first. It's like when when the Soviets took over in Moscow, and for that matter, when the Nazis took over in Berlin, the first people to fall were many of the most loyal members, because they weren't pure enough. So that's how these sorts of communistic things work. But David, I want to talk about two other stories that are coming out of your state, which both I think perhaps are being obscured by this, frankly, much more minor story. Somebody makes an insulting comment, sure, let them be disciplined. They have to punish the whole school and make it a national subject. That's interesting. And those two stories are your Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, has now come out and said that she heard from a third-hand source, not mentioning whom, that President Trump wanted to have her assassinated right after the election. She's in apparently a tight race with Kim Karamo. I don't know if you're following this. I don't know if Kim
Just you
Karamo.
mentioning that, I mean, I don't think she is in a tight race. You're just hoping that she
No,
is.
I think she's in a tight race. The last poll shows that Kim Karamo, even though she's been blackballed from the entire media in your state, is moving up, and she's been endorsed by President Trump. President Trump in this last Republican primary, out of all, I think he endorsed 53 people, and out of those 53, 52 of them won their primaries. And there is a lot of heat and a lot of movement in that direction. And I think that Jocelyn Benson, who is a very corrupt official, as we've talked about, I don't want to go into it any further, but there were some real bad things that happened during the election. She's getting the heat, I think, from Kim Karamo in private polls, that Kim Karamo, even though there's a blackout, is threatening to take her out. The second story that is more relevant to what you and I discussed, which is Jewish issues, Israel issues, is your Congresswoman, Rashida Tlaib, has introduced a resolution for the US to formally recognize the Palestinian Nakba and to call for the quote, right of return of millions of Palestinians. And it was backed by the Squad, which is Omar and AOC and Cori Bush. Surprisingly, my own Congresswoman here in Massachusetts, who's a member of the Squad, that being Ayanna Pressley, she doesn't appear as a co-sponsor of this bill. I'm not sure why. She's co-sponsored everything the Squad has done, from the beginning. She's like a rubber stamp. I don't know why she didn't sponsor this one. I don't think it's because she suddenly got a pang of consciousness. I think she probably has COVID or something. I have no idea. But I guess that I'd ask you, what do you make of that? She's your Congresswoman.
Well, not yet. I mean, right now she's still, the district's been changed. So it won't be till next January that she'll be my congressperson. But yeah, I mean, it's the high 90% that she's likely to win. I mean, it's obvious that's what she's doing, what she's going to do. Whether there be enough to force it to a vote, I
No, there
doubt
won't be voted on. I doubt it too. But does this
even if they brought it to a vote in the Congress, maybe
No, I think that most Congress is against
it's
it,
possible
including
to get
most
over 100
Democrats.
votes. I mean, it's possible that.
No, apparently it's not getting anywhere, and most Democrats are against it.
Yeah, I don't even think it'll make it out of committee.
No, it won't.
And you're saying even Ayanna Pressley isn't. I mean, I would assume that there'd be tens of people that would sign on to it, but yeah, probably won't even make it out of committee. That I mean, Tlaib is doing it. I mean, it's obvious. Of course, she's doing it. What's the surprise?
And let me just tell you, the so-called Squad people, the people that did co-sign, included Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, by the way, has a pretty good Jewish constituency in Queens, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman, and Cori Bush, along with two Democrat reps, Betty McCollum and Marie Newman. So, it seems to me at a time with rising anti-Semitism in this country, and people writing manifestos and showing up shooting people and all of that, this is real poison to be pouring out. This is like real kerosene on the fire.
No, I mean, saying she's a Palestinian. There's really very little advocacy for Palestinians in America. Jews, Israel have a huge lopsided support across the board. That saying like, of course, I mean, that's why the Jewish community wants to defeat her so badly. It's just unlikely they're going to be able to. But I don't see it as anti-Semitic, specifically coming from a Palestinian. Of course, that's what she wants to do, and even from
Well, it calls for the de facto annihilation of the state of Israel. And it goes back to issues of 1947. It's asking the US government to recognize, basically to replace, to ask, to recognize instead, well, I don't think that the US government recognizes Yom HaAtzmaut anyways, which is Israel's National Independence Day, but the Nakba would replace that with a day of catastrophe, which is how they see Israel's independence, which is what Nakba means. And it's it really calls for the dismantling of Israel. So, I mean, I get the fact that you may not say that's anti-Semitic. I think it is, in my opinion. It's certainly anti-Jewish because
well, it could be, but I mean, if a Palestinian, it's in their group interest to do. So, it just seems obvious. Like, of course, and I would assume that I mean, I know that. I mean, the other Palestinian woman running as a Democrat in Metro Detroit, who will be running against John James, the failed Senate candidate, if she wins the Democratic primary, would support that. I mean, it's not obvious to you that that's the way majority of Palestinians look at it. And as they rise to more power in America, they'll try to change U.S. policy towards that. I mean, if you're talking about American Jews or American Christians, but like certainly that Palestinians would feel that way isn't surprising.
Well, I get that. It's not surprising, but it's unfortunate that they would take this tack. I mean,
I don't say it's unfortunate, and that's like it's their group interest. Like
I don't think it's in their interest.
I mean, we're at war somewhat with the Palestinians. Like, of course, like that they're using like BDS, and like Alan Dershowitz mentions, the university campus is probably a testing ground and a predictive of what things are going to be like in tens of years, and very likely that, I mean, you see in the university campuses where BDS is being passed right and left, even Harvard, the Harvard Crimson, that probably 20 years from now, that will be the mainstream Democratic position. And
I doubt it. I mean, I think that the BDS has been around now for a long time. I think that it hasn't grown. It's basically fairly static. And anti-Israel
started passing man, this is what Alan Dershowitz said, who's one of the biggest fighters against it, and saying like, no, man, BDS just started winning resolutions in like the last 20 years top, and really 10
they
years.
have, but I think that
they brought the BDS resolution every year in University of Michigan for over 10 years till it passed. And it's Palestinian.
Yeah, but I don't think so
every single university has a safe students, the Palestinian organization, and brings BDS resolutions every single year.
Sure they do. They've been doing it since the 60s.
I say like it's
I know they'll never stop. They've been doing it since the 60s over here in Massachusetts at UMass. There was the same activity. It's been going on probably since Israel was established. And I don't think that they really, I mean, to me, they probably reached a high watermark, maybe, I don't know, about 5 years ago. I don't see that, they maybe will get something passed, and then there'll be a few years, and then it gets rescinded, as it did recently in Israel, and also as it did recently at UMass at Amherst. So,
God forbid we're going to talk about the shooting and the Great Replacement Manifesto.
Yeah, let's talk about that too.
But even just saying related to this, from the right wing position in Israel and what happened in Europe, the cause of it is immigration, specifically Arab and Palestinian immigration. The number of Palestinians is increasing. Like there will be a few million Palestinians.
I don't think ultimately in this
and as the number of Muslim Arabs, specifically Palestinians in America, increase, and likely there'll be more, maybe not Palestinians, but there's still more Jews than Arabs. There's only like less than 3
million. Are you
Arabs.
suggesting that an increase of immigration by Muslims and Arabs into the United States they're all going to be anti-Israel?
Well, not they're all going to be, but at a certain brink point, that if you look at this, is what really the right wing people in Israel said. If you look what happened in Europe, it's a certain brink point of demographics, and the main force is Arab Muslim immigration. Europe
And that they're
was
going to be
France,
anti-Israel.
where you
Now,
have,
what are the left
I
wingers
mean,
in
Eric
Israel
Zemmour
saying?
ran on this, like even God forbid, like the conspiracy theory Great Replacement, Eric Zemmour ran, that was his main platform. But if you see that in France, where like BDS and anti-Israel activism, it's really directly related to demographic change, specifically of Arabs and Muslims. And those demographics are going to keep on changing. And we don't have to disagree again, but I mean, your hypothesis that Americans, you have some sort of deep support for Israel, as opposed to it's the hard work of American Jews that fight to have America support Israel. There'll be some brink where eventually there's going to be more Arabs and Muslims in America, and they're going to work
Well,
harder
Jovan, you
than the
say that
Jews.
in Israel, it's the right wing, as you say, that is saying this. What is the left wing saying about immigration of Arabs and Muslims?
Well, I'm saying the right wing is saying the reason why America, that it's the cause of this is immigration to America, specifically of Arabs and Muslims, and it's an important issue to them. And
To destroy Israel. Now, is there any hope that the Palestinians and Muslims who are immigrating to the United States may reject that idea, might take a more conciliatory stand toward Israel? I mean, you say that this is in their interest. I don't think it's in their interest. It's going to create war. What's in their interest is to try to develop a Palestinian state or sovereignty by being peaceful and by developing a sense of coexistence with Israel.
yeah, I'm
Is there
saying
any?
BDS is is the peaceful method.
No, BDS is trying to destroy Israel through boycotts.
Well, no, I'm saying violence is the violent method. BDS is the
No,
non-violent
they're both
political
they're
method.
both trying to destroy Israel, the one through violence, the other through strangulation. The
Yeah, but
point
I'm
I'm
saying
asking
BDS is the peaceful of the
is the
methods.
peaceful
BDS is the
version of
peaceful
a
method.
movement to destroy Israel.
But I mean, it's
My
a political
question
method.
is there any hope that there might be a shift away from these modalities and one toward embracing Israel as a Jewish state and developing an Arab state alongside it, a sovereign state, the vision of King Faisal? Is there any type of movement like that within Muslims and Arabs in this country?
Not really. I
Yeah,
mean, and like saying this is more the opinion of Israelis, of American politics, and than like leftist, or that it's an important issue,
well,
even with like the UAE, the Abraham Accords. Uh, those aren't populous countries, and if you're talking like the populous Arab countries, Syria, Egypt, Jordan,
well, Egypt has a peace relationship with Israel.
they have a military agreement.
And they have a diplomatic exchanges as ambassadors in each capital. They have, and Morocco recently not only made peace with Israel, but I believe they're opening their embassy in Jerusalem. That's a fairly populous.
Yeah, I mean, but most Egyptian Americans have negative views towards Israel, pro-Palestinian
Right.
sentiment.
No, I don't doubt it. But I mean, I guess that what you're saying, and I don't disagree, is that there's not going to ever be, or there certainly isn't going to be for 1,000 years, any change in the Muslim and Arab world in terms of their desire to destroy Israel. And so thus we need to proceed by fighting them, not literally, but fighting them in the area of public opinion and in the area of countering their attempts to set up anti-Israel, and I would argue anti-Semitic activities on college campuses, whether it be militant type of things or whether it be BDS. We have to meet them every time. It's sort of like the way the Israelis approach the war. They are just very careful and very vigilant to simply focus on the very specific enemy. And that when I say specific, I mean the individual. And they try to take them out. And they do it very methodically and over time as it arises. And it's going to take I think it was none other than Chaim Weitzman who was once asked this question right around the time that Israel became sovereign, where he said, do you think there'll ever be a peace between the Jews and the Arabs? Do you think there'll ever be some sort of a coexistence? And he said, yes, but I think it's going to take 1,000 years. And I think that that is probably true. It's going to just have to be a tit for tat. Every time they step up, we're going to have to meet them both on the field of ideas and on the field of battle. And it's just going to go on like that. And that ultimately the answer to it is to not only seek peace, but to do so aggressively and to do so sometimes with strength. I mean, it's sort of like what Reagan talked about, peace through strength. Anyway, let's talk about the what happened in Buffalo and the so-called Great Replacement, because I know you've talked about this. The guy that did this horrendous atrocity on American soil took up arms. Obviously, he was well trained, by the way, and he had military gear, and he decided to go down and start murdering Black people. I mean, this is something that we can't just. I mean, I'm not going to just pass over this. It's probably going to be the subject of my next book. I mean,
I watched the video. I mean, it was horrendous. He shot in the head, people on the floor. I mean, they shot the people and then they're on the floor.
Oh, it's horrendous. It's the most evil thing you can
executed
imagine.
them point blank, and it was just horrendous cruelty, of unimaginable
most
level. I
evil
watched
thing.
your interview,
And I'm not going to let this lie. We have to find out who the person was and what he believed in. And I also, this is before we go to there, I'm going to just
I really
say,
believed in him. Saying he doesn't appear to have been a member of any groups. I mean, that
no, I think that what it is,
it was internet, and it doesn't appear. I mean, if like anyone's taking credit, that even Discord, like it could have been Russians. I mean, he spoke to people on the internet. It's unclear who those people are. I don't know if they're going to be able to find out. They may not even have been, real or Americans. But I mean, he definitely wasn't part of, I mean, from what's came out, of any actual group. All of the, alt-right, even the Nazis denounced him. Like I watched
right. I mean, it's
I watched
similar
an interview,
to,
like even like the Nazi party
of course they
of
denounce
America
him. They're not
denounced
going
this
out
guy
just shooting
and said,
people.
like, if they had known this guy, they would have talked him out.
Well, David, this is why I find this situation, and also the one in South Carolina where that guy showed up at a Black church and started murdering Black women there worshiping. There is something about this that is not normal. And let me just tell you what I mean. Because even the neo-Nazis, even we've always had groups like that in this country. There's always been, white supremacists, extremists on the fringe. They don't go out and they start shooting people like this. It's not something that's ever been done. So there's something about this. And I mean, I'm sorry to sound a little conspiratorial here, but I think that this might be some kind of a CIA-based psyop where this man was tampered with mentally. I think that I compare it to the people that murdered President Kennedy and Senator Robert F. Kennedy and maybe Martin Luther King. I mean, these are situations where the people that did this, certainly in the case of Robert Kennedy, I mean, if there's been interviews with Sirhan, where he felt that he had been programmed. And we know that the CIA with MK Ultra, going back to World War II, we know that the Nazis had really advanced research in terms of psychological manipulation, and that a lot of those Nazi scientists came to the United States after the war. We know that the British had the Tavistock Institute, that the Soviets had a major operation, and that they were studying psychological conditioning and mind control and psychological tampering, not only with individuals, but with populations as a whole. And I just wonder if this isn't some kind of an operation with this person, this, kind of living in a middle-class area, all of a sudden shows up with perfectly trained with a military precision, and he just starts blowing people away. Is there a reason for this kind of evil to happen? I mean, just doesn't happen out of nowhere. Now,
Well, I mean, the
again, I'm not
psychologists you
saying
talk
that I
to,
know this. It's just there's something about it that does not look normal.
the psychologists you talk to kind of miss the obvious that, one thing, COVID-19, now at this point, about 1 out of 300 Americans have died of COVID-19, 1 out of 400. I mean, if you take the numbers, you want to lower it down, but it's like a significant number, uh, economic decline, lockdowns, the risk reward calculation of life has changed, where your typical person, like, okay, I have good things to look forward to in my life, and therefore I'm not going to do something dumb that would ruin that, have changed in the sense that, well, maybe I don't really have that much to look forward to, and therefore there's less of a reason not to do something stupid that could uh, diminish my future. And it's like, clearly this guy was talking to anonymous people on the internet who were encouraging him for over a year.
Do we know who those people were?
I don't think we're going to find out. I mean, they may not have been Americans. We did say, like, it's Discord, 4chan, 8chan, mostly anonymous people. There were 20 people who were watching his live stream, and encouraging him. And I mean, I remember a big rabbi said, 9/11, that it was he used the Hebrew word rishis. It was one of the just biggest acts he'd seen of just pure hatred
Sure.
in his
Well,
lifetime.
world history, yeah.
And but you could see that there's something in humanity we're reaching, God forbid, that, the Talmud, uh, like Jewish suffering, the Holocaust, like the 70-year cycle. The Talmud uses the expression, there's a ritual in Rome that happens every 70 years. It's so bloody that people should only see it happen in their lifetime once. And God forbid, that's just a statement in the Talmud, but say that there's some sort of severe bloodletting cycle that every 70 years there's going to be massive war and kill off of humanity. God forbid, but whatever it is that happened, World War II, that this nature of humanity turning against each other, ready to fight, like I was mentioning at the beginning, even our liberal woke school is being denounced in the media and by leftist politicians as racists. And just this quick ability, everyone to turn against each other, and just to pull the trigger, God forbid, where some stupid kid is willing to pull the trigger against innocent people. And if something like is happening, like I remember the JCC, I suspected it was an Israeli. I remember everyone didn't believe me, but when Trump first got elected and there was the JCC bomb threats for months going on,
It turned out to be an Israeli kid.
yeah, I mean, I suspected just by the nature of it that it's probably an Israeli. But even that level of hatred, to say that, like, no, I mean, God forbid, I think it's Israelis who hate American Jews that much. It's not anti-Semites. It's not even neo-Nazis. It's actually Israelis that have that deep hatred of American Jews. That it would be an Israeli doing it, and people
Right.
like, you're crazy. And even you think like World War II and Zionist conspiracies and the Holocaust, and saying like, no, I mean, God forbid, there are a lot of Jews that conspired to have other Jews killed. And if you take a dark view towards human nature, that
I don't know if that's true.
well, I mean, people will pull the trigger. There's going to be people that
Yeah,
just
but I don't think it
give a
was
crap,
Jews.
and
Jews
they'll
were
pull the
com-
trigger. And if it's not going to be like, oh, like,
No, but I don't think Jews were conspiring to kill Jews in the Holocaust. And
I
I
do.
also,
I do.
well,
I think, I mean, just
like
like I
who?
said, that I think that there was hatred from
Can you give
Jew
me
to
an
fellow. There
example
was
of that?
just as much murderous hatred from Jew to fellow Jew as there was from,
Can you give me an example of that, David?
Well, I mean, the thousands of the 70,000 Jews that served in the Nazi army.
I never heard that.
I have
70,000.
the books, Hitler's Jewish soldiers, but I was saying of mixed blooded Jews. I mean, you think like
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but they
Moses
weren't,
Mendelssohn's
they
great
might have had some,
grandson. Moses Mendelssohn's great great
sure,
grandson
that's,
was a
and they're
senior
not
ranking
Jews.
Nazi officer.
Yeah, but then Moses Mendelssohn, yeah, his grand and his children convert to Lutheranism. Look, I mean, they,
I'm saying
well, but
there was just
you're
as much
getting into,
murderous hatred
no,
from Jew to fellow Jew as there was from
Sylvan,
anti-Semitism.
I'm sorry to say this, but you're starting to walk into some race theory here. You know,
No,
because some,
I'm just saying a negative view towards human nature. It's not a racial theory. There
no,
could be
but you,
just
when
as
you
much.
start to say Jews were involved in the Nazi army and that, and you're talking about somebody who has some Jewish ancestry, they have a great grandparent who's a Jew, and you're calling them a Jew. That's what the Hitler did. You know, I mean, this isn't, they're not Jews.
No,
You
there were
know, I mean,
over 3,000 full 100% Jews who served for the Nazis. I mean, Hitler Aryanized 3,000. Hitler personally signed his own signature on over 3,000
yeah, but
blooded Jews
were
to
they
be
like
Nazi soldiers.
were they like Jewish Jews? I mean, were they like, I mean, they probably, their parents probably or grandparents had converted to Christianity generations ago. I
See
mean,
if you could interview Briggs, who wrote Hitler's Jewish
I will
soldiers.
interview him. Thank you.
I'm not sure
Send
if
it.
you have Briggs. I mean, I have all his books.
Yeah, I just wonder, I don't know a lot about this, but I have a feeling that what you're talking about are Germans who had some Jewish ancestry, maybe even all Jewish ancestry. Look, Karl Marx had Jewish parents. He was not a Jew. I mean, they converted to Christianity when he was a baby, and he grew up a Christian. His first book was about the Trinity. I mean, they were not, it's really a little bit kind of racist, if I might, to suggest that they were Jewish, and that they were consciously Jewish. But moving back to
They
the,
were because they actually
they were Jewish according to Nazi race theory. They were
no, I
Jewish.
mean, they had a waiver and saying, I mean, the
Yeah,
history.
because
Like,
the Nazis,
I didn't know till I read those books that Hitler
yeah, but this is sure
actually
because
signed over 3,000 Aryanization of Jews, that he
sure,
officially
I don't doubt that.
Aryanized over
But
3,000.
that was because
Those
according to
documents
Nazi,
still exist. I mean,
look,
like the
I
researcher
don't
Briggs
doubt
did the
this. My
research,
point,
and the documents with Hitler's signature on
fine,
over
I
3,000
don't
documents
doubt
still
this.
exist.
My point is that this is based on crackpot Nazi race theory that they were Jews, because he looked at it by blood, which seems to be what you do, by the way, and has nothing to do with whether or not someone's actually a Jew or non-Jew. They were, they might have had, according to Nazi race theory, they could have been seen as a Jew. But,
Israeli history. I mean, even the three founding armies of Israel, if it was Lehi, Mapai, and one of the differences, does Jew kill fellow Jew? And there was, I forget which
well,
one.
there was some
which.
civil war.
One of them had, Jews don't kill fellow Jews, and one of them that were willing to kill fellow Jews, and there was the founding armies.
Yeah, there was a civil war
Israel.
between the radical left and the radical
There was
right
even armies,
in
and one of
Israel.
the prime
What's
ministers
that
of
matter of
Israel
being a Jew?
killed his fellow Jews.
Look,
because
Americans killed each other in the American Civil War too. There was a civil war, kind of a sort of an informal underground civil war within Israeli society between the far left, the Mapai, as you say, which were communist, and the Irgun, which were on the right. And there were some people. They had that. What was it? Arasulov was assassinated while he walked along the beachfront in Tel Aviv. So sure, there was some assassinations and there was some killings in this war, but it wasn't the fact that all of these people happen to be Jewish isn't the point. The point is that there was very strong ideological differences. Even the movie Exodus shows this. I mean, Leon Uris in his novel Exodus, he shows how there was a breakdown, brother against brother. There was almost like a semi-civil war within Israeli society until Ben Gurion had the courage to stand up and declare the state independent, and then that went away. In a way, you could say this about Americans killed Americans in the Civil War. I mean, and more so because the fact that people all happen to be Jewish is beside the point. But I want to go to,
We're talking about Jews. I'm just saying it's a
yeah, that they were having a
fundamental part
civil
of human
war.
nature.
We've already
As
gone over
society
it.
deteriorates, people will turn against each
Yeah,
other.
well, it's just
And,
that there was
and,
strong
and
ideological
as there's
difference.
less, as the risk reward calculation changes, that will include, God forbid, murder.
Of course, I mean, there was a civil war, just like Americans from the North killed Americans from the South during the Civil War. There was a breakdown in society. There was ideological differences, primarily over the question of slavery. And it led to a war where 600,000 Americans on both sides were murdered in a war. Anyway, about the replacement, I want to go to that. Um, this guy this Buffalo shooter, it's not really clear. I mean, it's really despicable that the New
The
York
alleged
Times.
manifesto,
Can
it's,
I
as
please
of this,
talk?
it's alleged, at this point, might
Can I
not,
please finish my sentence?
yeah.
On the next day, I listened to the New York Times podcast, The Daily, and I read and I watched Morning Joe and Mika, those two nitwits on MSNBC, and they were really using this as an exploitative thing to try to say that this guy was, a Republican, basically, and that this is what the conservatives are because they all believe in the so-called replacement theory and that's now gone mainstream. And that they then pointed a finger at Tucker Carlson. You would have thought that they were talking about QAnon the way they were looking at him. Oh, his hand goes this way. That means he did this. And his hand went that way. That means this way, this crap that they were pushing. And it's really a despicable thing to watch. It is utter propaganda. But the fact of the matter is that, first of all, this guy, his ideological orientation is not so clear. The website had on the symbol of the Ukrainian Nazi Azov battalion. He called himself an eco-fascist and an authoritarian leftist. He was an environmental radical, and that the reason that he was against immigration and he was anti-black was because he felt there were too many people, and he felt that it was bad for the environment. He wanted to, it was an eco radical. So, and again, I'm not pointing a finger here. I'm just saying that the issues are rather complex. But putting that aside, I do want to talk about, and I want to get to this question of the so-called replacement thing, because that is an issue that has come up on the very radical fringes of the right.
Why do you say that? I mean, saying that's, I mean, say it's really mainstream.
No, it's a real thing. It's
I
not
mean, like
mainstream.
almost 30% of the Republican Party, Eric Zemmour, that was his official platform running for French president.
Well, I'm talking about the United States here.
And in the United States, I say it's not a fringe thing that the Great Replacement is probably accepted by 20, not these murderous, horrible, crimes, but
Yeah, but the question,
replacement
what I want to
theory
get
is a
to is,
mainstream theory.
no, I want to get to how we define the so-called replacement theory. And I see three definitions that have been put out there. The first one is the one that you're talking about, the conventional one, which I think is on the radical fringe right wing, which is that white people are being replaced by people of color in this country, and that there's something wrong with that. It happens to be the truth, but there's something evil about that, and white people are being, suppressed. The second theory is the one that was promoted by the New York Times and by the liberals, which is basically the same, that immigration is going to make the country a majority minority country by a certain date. There's been multiple articles about this in the liberal press. You've talked about this. I've talked about it. And that this is coming down the pike, and that the reason why liberals are happy about it is because they think that the new immigrants are going to vote Democratic and are going to replenish the Democratic Party, which, by the way, I think they're quite wrong about. Yeah, they are. There is a big influx of immigrants with open borders, which is why they support that. And that they do think that the people are going to be voting Democratic. There's even bills in some of the major cities, New York in particular has one, which is trying to give undocumented immigrants the right to vote. Even in Massachusetts, there's a bill to give undocumented immigrants licenses, which will mean that they can register to vote. So yeah, that is, I think, something that not only is true, but they've been bragging about that for years in the New York Times. That's the second replacement theory, and they're wrong to assume that these people are going to vote Democratic. The third replacement theory that I see is the one that is discussed by people like Steve Bannon and, in a way, myself, and this is one which is of a concern, and that is that the American people are going to replace the world globalist elites who are running the country, what Bannon calls the administrative state. I mean, I talk about this in my new book, The Biden Coup. And this goes back to the Wilson administration. It goes back to kind of an informal elite that's made up of elected officials with a revolving door between them and quasi-public agencies like the Federal Reserve and the Council on Foreign Relations and the private foundations and nonprofits and the big corporations, and that they all sort of have this cozy, almost aristocracy with international links, and that is going to be replaced by the people. And it's that replacement theory, the multicultural, multi-ethnic nationalism and populism that was represented by Donald Trump. And that's the one that I embrace. But, I think that all three of these, and this is probably going to be the topic of my new book, all three of these replacement theories are out there. And, there's some truth in any of them. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, demographic change. So, replacement theory is implying a conspiracy because it's caused by man. So if you start demographic change, and we've argued about this in the past, and like I mentioned, global warming or environmental change, and like what happens if Haiti is no longer suitable to house man, and there's 10 million people from Haiti that have to find someplace else to live, and the likely that a lot of them would seek here in America, and it's not necessarily you're saying that the factors that could be greater than any cause of man, whether man tries to stop it or not. But that people from the South are moving to the North, and the demographic, generally people from the South are darker skinned than people in the North. So if you just look at it, that darker skinned people are demographically, if you want to say, replacing or integrating into northern territories. That's factual. It's happening across the globe, Europe and America. As a conspiracy theory, then you're saying that it's maybe natural, maybe unnatural, and you say it's unnatural and it's being caused by policy, and it's being caused by policy for a reason. And so as a conspiracy, saying
To
that
help the Democratic Party.
what if you say,
So
so if you take and I've heard people say that, just a joke, what do you call, illegal immigrant, or someone new, a Democratic voter. And
right,
from
exactly.
that perspective, that, politically, we're in a democracy and you win elections by majority, and immigrants tend to vote Democratic no matter where they come from. And so the more immigrants, the more Democratic voters.
That's an assumption, which I'm not sure is entirely true. That's my
But-
point. I don't know if Hispanics, for example, are going to be interested in, sex change operations. I'm just saying that, some of these people, the immigrants who come from more traditional cultures, they're not necessarily going to go along with the woke Gestapo in this country. They're going to be turned off by things like abortion, frankly. And other
he's talking
things.
rational actor, that people act in their own self-interest, and the Democrats see that immigrants are more likely to support the Democratic Party. So Democrats support more open immigration policy because
that's the assumption. And I think that, as I said, the New York Times, all the big papers have talked about this openly. And I think they're assuming that. I don't know if I think they may be wrong about assuming that. But David, as far as whether Haiti becomes inhabitable, I mean, I think we talked about this already. I don't understand why Haiti, if Haiti's going to become uninhabitable because of an alleged global climate issue, why wouldn't Massachusetts become uninhabitable for the same reason? I mean,
Well,
why would this
you
just,
didn't have earthquakes and hurricane. I mean, you did, but I was saying that Haiti got hit much worse by the earthquakes and hurricanes. I mean, just
yeah, but if it's going
factual
to be
that
global warming,
Hades suffered extreme environmental catastrophe over the last few decades. It's killed hundreds of thousands
so
of
is in
people.
California. The
No, I mean
point
it's
is
not
that,
comparable. I'm saying what the and it's saying Haiti's an island. It's right in the
okay,
middle of major hurricanes, and even in terms of the earthquakes that have hit Haiti are much worse than the earthquakes. Uh, but I mean, whatever the order, I'm saying that, yeah, I mean, environmental could but it's reason. I mean, this is debated also, but just say that Haiti is a dangerous place to live because of environmental concerns, and the millions of people that live on that island are going to have to be evacuated, and presumably uh, their prime destination target's going to be America because they probably will
they'd
have
like to come here, but that's not necessarily, I mean, there's plenty of countries that are vast and open, like Argentina or Brazil or,
so you have people like George Soros who funded these caravans, but it's a natural, unconspiratorial reason why hundreds of thousands of Haitians made their way to the border. And the summer
oh, there is,
we
and
had
I don't blame them
I mean,
for
there's
doing that.
leftists who supported them and did everything
Right,
possible
because
so
they
that they
felt that
would
it
get
would
into
help them,
America. But the reason why they were coming here, you say, was unconspiratorial. It was due to environmental
yeah,
concerns that Haiti wasn't. Um,
it's
but
not sustainable. And David, I don't blame them for wanting to come here. Look, I mean, my great grandparents came here because their environment was inhospitable politically, but and I don't blame them. The left thinks that they're going to come here because they're going to fit their agenda, which is to enhance the Democratic Party, weaken the concept of national sovereignty, weaken private property, and to do all the leftist stuff they're trying to do. And I don't think it's going to work, especially with Haitians who are very entrepreneurial and they're very good, loyal Americans. It's an excellent group. I don't think that Haitians are super. I mean, here in Boston, you have super entrepreneurs who are Haitians. I mean, they're an amazing, culture that has really thrived. So I don't think that, and by the way, they tend to be conservative too. So I don't think that it's going to work in the bigger picture. It may work in the immediate, but in the bigger picture, the replacement theory promoted by the left is going to backfire on them because race doesn't really have a lot to do with it. What it is all about is culture, and their cultures tend to be more conservative. And there's nothing the left despises more than a conservative person of color. In the same way, there's nothing that Jews despise more than a Jewish person who's not on the left. It's a cultural thing, it's a political thing. But the third, so anyway, those are
I
the
mean,
three.
the main of the conspiracy theory. It's saying that, God forbid, it's a war against white people, and the purpose of this is to destroy white people, and white
Yeah,
people
that's the radical right
have
wing
to
thing, for
defend
sure.
themselves, and
But
put it as a
that's a
conspiracy
well,
theory. Even if you put it like George Soros is what his intentions are. So, like, okay, he's got a weak Jewish heart and has a soft spot for immigrants. He made a lot of money, so he figures he'll try to help out Haitian immigrants. Or you say George Soros has just some hatred of white people and
no,
using
he's a
money
leftist. He
to
wants to have an
support.
international land colony. But the thing, look, David,
I say that to put it in a conspiracy, is George Soros using his money to wage war against white people
no, he's
and
using his war to wage war
immigration?
against the United States. He wants to replace the United States politically as and turn it into a province of the world.
Using immigration as a method
As a
to do
means
it.
to do it. Exactly. One of the means. And some of the other means are removing police, defunding the police,
Well, helping them
promoting
enter
drug use,
political power.
legalizing drugs and marijuana. There's all sorts of tracks that George Soros is on to weaken our republic, to weaken our society so that we can be merged into a province of the world. That's what he's about. But look, the issue of well, anyways, so that's the
I've
Soros.
argued with way too many of these
Oh,
conspiratorial
that's what I'm
people,
saying.
and they'll come straight out as like, like, God forbid. I mean, they'll sound like Israelis, just paranoid, that like you don't
I don't think
understand.
the Israelis are
People,
paranoid. They got a real threat to deal with. That's not
well, I
paranoia.
said they sound like them. So you're saying they have a real threat to deal with. You may be right.
In Israel, they do. That the
Well,
United
that's
States, not
well,
so
well,
much.
saying whether they do or not, and maybe you're right that they do. That so to say the white conspiracists sound like Israelis, and they make it sound like they're under threat, and that is basically like they got to start killing people or to survive. It's like they're and they'll use the words they're waging genocide
Right.
against
Well, I don't think, first of all,
white genocide, and and
we've talked about this, and yes, this
I mean,
is
it's
the
the war
first.
of words to put it that once you get that language using, the assumption reaches the point where there is no political solution and violence is the only method that's going to work.
Look, David, as we've, the three replacement theories I went over, you were talking about the first one, which is the radical right-wing racist one, and that is a real thing.
What do
They
you mean the
do think,
conspiracy, like who and why they're doing it? I mean, I don't know if
well, they
there's
think that
different,
white people
there's
are,
no different, there's only one replacement theory. The only
no, there are
difference
three.
is who is someone orchestrating it and
And
why.
they all have a level of orchestration, but the one that we're talking about right now, which is the racist one, they believe that the white, they're into this idea of white identity in the same way that critical race theory is into black identity, and that they think that white people are being replaced, and that there is a violent element to that. And of course, that's wrong. And that the idea that the New York Times and the liberals would say, well, this is the Republican idea, is wrong. First of all Americans, black and white, all Americans of all ethnic backgrounds are uncomfortable with the arrival of new immigrants. That's natural. In the same reason that we're uncomfortable, slightly at least, when a new person moves into our block. We don't know them. We're not sure how they're going to fit in. We're not sure what their intentions are. That is a normal human reaction.
Xenophobia.
It can be if it turns out to be unfounded, but the point is there is a natural element that's not phobic. When you meet somebody new, you don't know
Natural
who they
phobia is
are.
natural, just like
I don't know.
fear
The
of
word,
heights,
no, 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 wait a
fear
minute.
of crowds, fear of heights
No, no,
is
no. The
natural.
word
Fear of
phobia,
strangers is
no.
natural.
The word phobia implies something that's not natural. It implies fear of something that's not real. When you have when you're I don't know, homophobic or Islamophobic, your fear of a
I mean, it's just a
homosexual, or
connotation that's taken up.
it's because
The
you
word just
somehow,
means fear. It's
yeah, but the
taking a
point is that
pejorative connotation,
yeah, no, no,
like a condition, but it just
when you
means
have a
scare.
phobia, it's a fear that is exaggerated and unfounded. If you have agoraphobia, fear of heights, we're all afraid of heights. Nobody,
Necrophobia, spiders.
fear of spiders. It's like it becomes a phobia when it reaches a point where it's out of proportion to what's real. We all have natural fear of heights. Nobody likes to go on top of the Empire State Building and go to the edge of the wall. It's a little, you feel unnerved. But if you're so fearful that you might not ever go up the elevator, that might be a phobia because it is beyond, the actual threat. So yeah, we're all concerned. We all have fears that are legitimate and natural when we're involved with dealing with new people, because again, we don't know them, we don't know their intentions. But it's not quite, it doesn't cross into a phobia. It becomes a phobia if it's a fear that's unfounded and not
I'm just
based
making
on
linguistic because it's entered that
no,
phobias have became a
words matter.
psychological condition.
Well, it can become a
The word
psychological
itself
condition.
just means fear, and because psychology
The
has
word
used
means,
in the word
well, I'm talking about the
denote a
psychological use.
psychological condition.
I'm talking about the psychological use of the word, and it does mean that it's a fear that is beyond the actual threat.
And that's why it's a psychological condition.
Exactly. But the point is that we all have concerns about new immigrants. That is not a phobia, but that's a real question. If you have a massive influx of Muslim immigrants from Yemen or from Somalia, you might have concerns about whether or not they're going to integrate and assimilate and acculturate into American life. There are concerns about that. And eventually we find out whether or not they're going to. And if they do, then those concerns abate. If they don't, then it becomes a problem. The point is that everyone, regardless of your ethnic background in this country, has those concerns because those concerns are normal. The problem is that the,
Yeah, I mean, the polling's clear that the concerns are much more among Republicans, that 50% of
the concerns
Republicans are
are among
concerned about
everybody.
whites becoming a
No, the
minority,
concern,
and,
those
and
concerns,
the concern is
I
much
reject
less
that.
among Democrats.
I reject that. Everyone, including Black people, are concerned about that to a
When the
certain
polling
degree.
is clear that it's
I
much
don't care
more
about
concern.
polling. I'm talking about human beings. Everyone has a certain level of concern over that. That whether or not white people are going to be a minority, whether you're Black, white, or otherwise, it's just natural. And it's not a problem. I personally am not concerned about it. I don't really care about someone's ethnic background. I care whether they're a loyal American and whether they're, I'm more interested in their culture. I don't really care about their skin colors. It doesn't matter to me. But I understand that there is a general concern over that. Now, that concern can become extreme when you go to a fringe and they actually think that race matters, that it means something, that being white actually has some significance, which it doesn't. Because obviously a Black person or an Asian person or anyone of any background can become fully acculturated as an American, regardless of their race. I mean, that's the better side of understanding America, and that's, I think, who we really are. But you do have this radical fringe who thinks that being white actually means something. It doesn't. And that they're the ones who might act out. I agree with that. They're not necessarily Republicans or conservatives. This guy Gendron, who shot up the Buffalo, he's a radical leftist, from what I can tell from his comments, and self-described. He's an eco-radical. And he also has these kind of concerns. His dislike of non-white people is because they have higher birth rates, and he thinks it's going to be damaging to the environment. Not because he's a racist and that he thinks Black people are, inferior or something like old-fashioned kind of racism.
Well, it's kind of like a suicide bomber. And I mean, it is us and them mentality where, for whatever reason, he was chosen or decided to become a suicide bomber. And I mean, he lived, and I guess he had almost committed suicide. Even the cops talked him out of committing suicide, but from the story, he had the gun to his head and was ready to commit suicide, and the cops talked him out of it.
Who is
But
this?
I mean, God forbid, the Buffalo shooter.
Oh, he was a suicide bomber?
Well, I'm giving comparison that is
okay.
there, and like a 14-year-old girl that tries to stab an Israeli at the checkpoint, and gets killed. And I mean, so the situation in Israel, I mean, God forbid, tensions were high again this week, but where there's multiple Palestinians every week that lay down their life to kill Israelis. And this guy was successful, but by saying every single week there's multiple Palestinians, sometimes they're teenage girls, who lay down their life just for the failed chance to kill Israelis.
Kill some Jews. David,
And saying but it's saying that I don't see anything fundamentally different between that and this Buffalo shooter.
Neither do I.
He was a suicide bomber.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with
and
you.
became radicalized probably in the exact same methods.
I agree. And I wonder, and as I said earlier, we're going to kind of wrap it up soon. I wonder if those methods are not enhanced mind control methods. Look, the Muslim tradition, Muslims have this going way back to the Middle Ages with the assassins, the cult of the Hashishi, that in Iran, where they would basically pick up usually some young man in a pub or something who's kind of a loser, and they find these people who are they, as you say, they don't have much sense of a future, and they take them under their wing and they bring them to this fabulous palace where they have women and food and wine, and they have every kind of earthly pleasure you can imagine, and they live like that for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then they say, look, you can come back here, but you have to go out and you have to kill this person. And when you do, you're going to then possess their soul. It's going to go into you and you're going to have super strength. And then you will experience this for eternity. And, plus there's a lot of drug use in those. That's where the word hashish comes from, the hashishim. It's also where the word assassin comes from, this cult. So this is how they would get someone to go out and do a suicide attack. And I think that those techniques, which were mastered in the Middle Ages, I think that they're still around in the Muslim world. I think that every
You
culture.
really need techniques, saying that like, is it just group conflict has reached the point
No, I think
where
it's
people
technique.
are
I
willing
think
to
people are
sacrifice their life?
chosen. I think individuals are chosen by people who know what they're doing, young, impressionable people who really are looking for a track in life, and they are groomed to do these terror attacks. And then they go in, and it's been reported by Israelis as well, when sometimes they capture them and they stop them, that they're almost in a trance, and it's almost like they don't even know what they're doing when they do these things. And after they're captured and they wake up, they don't even remember that they had done it. This was exactly the experience that Sirhan had when he assassinated Robert Kennedy. This is something that has been described by numerous people who were stopped after they did it, or they were stopped from doing it. So I'm not saying
like
I
in Israel,
know.
I mean, like, God forbid that case with the axe, it was an illegal worker that had worked tens of times. That God forbid, Jewish man had picked up the Palestinian worker and had him doing construction work for him, and about 10 times. So the Israeli
I had trusted him.
investigation, and one time he decided to kill him with his own axe, and then go
Yeah.
on and kill more people. And
Look,
God forbid, if you're analyzing, is that abnormal psychology or that's normal psychology? Group conflict has reached the level.
no, I don't. I think that I wonder if
I have the book here, Ordinary Men, about the Germans who became Nazis and killers, and saying they were really ordinary men.
yeah, but they might have. It could have
saying
been.
that's Palestinians. I was going to say, like,
Yeah, but
it's not, they're ordinary Palestinians.
Yeah, they're ordinary losers who were groomed by people who knew what they were doing. Even the Nazis.
I'm saying just group conflict has reached
No,
the point.
I wonder if it's that even with the Nazis, there are stories of how they would find these people to do the actual work in the death camps. They would be groomed to do that. They would be conditioned to do it over time, and then they would be set up. Another example I'll give, and we need to wrap it up. The editor of WorldNet Daily, David Kupelian, has written about this, in that his grandparents were Armenian in Turkey during the Armenian genocide, and that there were numerous reports from Armenians who had lived alongside Muslim Turks for generations. They didn't necessarily love each other, but they all lived in the same community, and they would have interactions that were normal. You'd come over, can I have a cup of sugar, that kind of thing. All of a sudden, during the genocide, there would be some kind of a signal, some sort of an external stimuli. There would be bells, or there would be something happening. And these people would turn into murderers, and they would start slaughtering people. And then there'd be something else that would happen, and they'd go back to normal, and they wouldn't even remember doing it. This was reported by numerous Armenians during that genocide. Now, I'm only bringing this up to point out that, yes, there's a group hatred that's built up by propaganda. We're having that right now with this propaganda against Russia. So we can now get into a nuclear war. It's not working, fortunately. But the point is that, yeah, governments will do that. But
I sold the book. It was actually kind of valuable. I had a few. Shirley Jackson's The Lottery. You familiar with that one?
No.
It's just an American short story where it's a town, and it looks like there's a person that they won the lottery, and when it comes to the day to collect their prize, they all stone them to death. And so that and it claims that when it came out, that it's still a popular short story read in American public schools, and there was a claim that it was anti-Semitic, and that it was written about the Holocaust and about Jews being the chosen people, and said, well, chosen for what? And we just think that we're chosen. God forbid that something's good going to happen to us, but God forbid that's what we're really chosen for is to be stoned to death. And this was one of the more popular American stories from the 50s, Shirley Jackson.
Okay.
And it was claimed that she wrote it about the Holocaust and Jews specifically, although she um, denied it. Maybe I think there was a recent movie in about like Sweden or something, like the weird ritual of like killing their elderly or something like that. But so I opened the Talmud says that there's just this 70-year cycle. And I mean, I've mentioned this a few times. I mean, today's actually Log Balmer Shem Bar Yochai, but it says that Herod was a slave in the house of Hashmonaim, and he heard a call from God, that literally a voice from heaven, that anyone who kills their master today won't be punished. And then he assassinated the whole
His whole
remainder of the
family.
Hashmonaim dynasty.
Yeah.
But the Talmud explains that there was literally a voice of God that he heard that said anyone that kills their master today won't be punished. Um, but it's saying that something that changes in the metaphysics of human reality, where a few years ago it wouldn't have happened. Like a person, but something changes, and people are more likely to resort to these violence. And as I mentioned, the Talmud, it's like if it's like a 70-year cycle
Right.
where there's just based on our own actions, we're just war, that you could call like a conspiracy if you think that there's someone conspiratorially doing it, or if you think it's just something in the air. And I mentioned like COVID-19, just the fact that so many people basically died for nothing, that a kid who had the normal expectations, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get a job, get married, build up a family, but like, no, this disease came, and like 1 out of 500 people died for nothing from just some crazy disease, that it cheapened the value of life
No,
and
I agree.
changed
And
the risk
also, I
reward
mean,
calculation.
I don't
You
want to
look
get
at World War II and the Spanish flu, coming like that, just cheapening the value of life, where it's like, of course I wouldn't do something that would throw away the rest of my life. But here, this disease could just kill you for nothing. So
I
it
think that
changes the.
it's too big a subject to get into, other than to say that I think that at least 70% of the people that died were over 80, and the rest of them were mostly obese and then had health conditions. But the rest of us suffered with the lockdowns, which I think were unnecessary. But I don't want to go there because we're on YouTube right now. Anyway, David, I just want to mention that my new book is available online now and as a soft cover. The Biden Coup. I'll mention the name of it, even though I know that's, even to say that, is controversial in so many quarters. The socio-political effects of an illegitimate regime. Check it out. It's on YouTube. It's on Amazon Books. Charles Moskowitz, and you can see it. I think I sent you one of it. At least I sent you, I believe, an email, an ebook. I'm going to be on with Alex Newman tomorrow, Monday, and I was on with Alex Newman's the other show he does a few days ago. I will tell you that it's very tricky getting interviewed for this book because of the topic that I cover. A lot of people who would normally interview me for my past books are too afraid to talk about this because it's such a hot topic. But it's not. I think that the truth is coming out, and I think it's going to come. It's more and more information is coming out every week, and it's not going to be able to be suppressed forever. So I'm glad to contribute to getting to truths. Anyway, David, what do you have coming up on your show?
Well, I went to that rapid additive manufacturing 3D printing conference and the steel conference. Like, God forbid, it's kind of depressing. Like I mentioned, the steel conference was at the the suburbs, at the kind of the Republican stronghold. Mr.
Of
Fisher, the
Livonia,
Jewish
right?
Novi,
Novi.
Novi, the Mr. Fisher, the Jewish billionaire car dealership, gun show guy with Republican leaning, and as opposed to the downtown. So 3D printing was supported by President Obama, and was huge initiatives to put 3D printers into schools, and it was a pretty big show.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's important, but it appears that 3D printing is kind of like overblown, and it's not really creating as many jobs as it should. But it was interesting that show had so many more people, and the steel show was just a handful of engineers. And I was streaming. I was thinking like like we're the bad guys. Steel is the bad guy. Like they're trying to get rid of steel, and it's just infrastructure. Like our infrastructure is going to hell. We've talked about that in the
Why
past.
would they want to get rid of steel?
Because steel is related. I mean, because just put like the steel industry is dominated by Republicans, but I mean, because steel is in the automobile business, um, steel is related to carbon emissions. It makes cars heavier, even though steel is more protective, and
Right.
your car is more,
They want the car to
but
be
it
light
weighs
like
a
a
bunch.
tin can, so
And
that
so they've been trying to get steel out of automobiles to reduce gas usage, and then generally, someone's asked about the infrastructure bill, and steel is like coal. It's a kind of a red state Republican field, and
Mhm.
politically, they're the bad guy, and so our infrastructure going to hell. And there were a few hundred engineers talking about steel. It was the 20th anniversary of this steel conference, and it was just a few hundred people, and it was kind of uh, you know kind of depressing. Although
It
like
is,
a lot
yeah.
of people were taking it seriously, their job, and then the 3D printing, which is in Detroit, has a huge amount of governmental support, and is probably I forget
But
the
it's not going to be the big thing.
well, I mean, it's important, but yeah, it's not
Sure.
really creating the jobs that they think it is.
I remember
And
for a while, it was like there was whole companies that people would, base solely on that. They were propping up in cities. That's not happening now. Anyway, David, so,
so next week, and it's funny, I
oh,
signed
by the
my
way, I can't do the show next week.
okay, yeah. So next week, there's actually I'm going to go to the plastic mold injection, um, conference, and I'll
Yeah.
probably stream, and that's pretty interesting. They rejected. I wanted to go to the it was a government fleet, and I guess I don't actually work for the government, so I can't even go to the conference. But they have some sort of conference for vehicles. But so the next week is the I'm going to go to the plastic mold invention
Okay.
convention conference, and then the week after automate, and you talk about, I mean, that's the bread and butter of kind of like American manufacturer,
Yeah.
and it's dead and depressing. So like like I'm a science geek, and like I did good in school, and I could take out like paper and write out equations, and no one cares, no one finds it interesting. So, but like I'm gonna go, and I'll probably do a stream of that, and so that's the only thing really I have coming up.
All right, David. So I'll see you in 2 weeks. And again, check out my book, The Biden Coup, and I'll talk to you then. Thanks a lot.
Okay, yeah, Shabbat Shalom. Have a great weekend.